All right, we are live on the air now, and this is hold on, I guess I should probably stop screen sharing for one, right? Did it stop? Okay. I think it did. Of course, now my camera's messed up. Oh man, this is going to be a technically challenging video today, people. And that's mostly I'll blame myself mostly. So we'll see what happens. But more
Now I see you. You even have multiple camps. Oh,
I do because I'm but it's a mess in here. So and now my video is acting up. So I'll navigate away from myself. So do I pronounce your name correctly in saying Jorg or
sure.
George?
It's urgent, so Jörg, Jörg, but just say George. Everyone knows how you mean. No,
Yeah.
how whom you mean.
Well, my mom's side of the family is all Dutch, so I should be able to pronounce it better than I can. But so she was actually born in Holland, and I grew up around that accent, but I'm still no good. Uh, Let me try changing this real quick. We'll see what happens. I'm going to change my webcam connection because it just disappeared. But so you are the man behind the instruments of Radical Technologies, and that's what's important here. My video doesn't really matter. Uh, so I figured I would interview you, but it took forever to get this interview set up. Really over a year now. We've been kind of talking back and forth about doing an interview, and we finally managed to pixelate and find our way into here. So, first thing I want to do is, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us what your role is over at Radical.
Oh, so at Radical, I've just ideas for music machines I need for myself, and hope to get also other people interested in this stuff. What I like to use, and this is mostly I'm developing mostly music machines, so not only instrument, but I always want to add something like sequencing or automation or something what gets it a little bit further. So we start with the Spectralis as the first synthesizer from Radical Technologies, and but that was for me not the first instrument. So we started at Quasi MIDI and in the past, so in the 90s, and there we already developed music machines. So always synthesizers with sequencers and arpeggiators and stuff like that. Because I really love to work without a computer, just with a couple of machines on stage. That really makes fun. And so what I'm doing at Radical is I have these ideas and then I'm designing a front panel and stuff like that. I'm discussing with a very smart guy who's much smarter than me. That's Andreas Tofan. And he then develops the electronics behind it. I so far only developed a little bit. So the analog filter, for example, isn't designed by me, but all the other stuff, the electronics and also the firmware programming is made by Andreas Tofan. So he's not a musician at all. So he's just the electronic and DSP guy, and I'm more the musician, and I can then interact with him and tell him when I like something or when I don't like it, or say we should add free running oscillators, for example, at the beginning of the Spectral, that it sounds more analog, and then we started to implement drifting and all this stuff that it sounds more and more analog. So it's just a musical job, so that I'm hearing what he's doing, and then we talk about it, and then I'm getting a new version. And now I'm talking already forever, so maybe you have another question.
Nope, that's the end of the interview. Actually, we're done now. That was it. So.
Goodbye, my friends.
Yeah. So that's actually you kind of started touching on some stuff that I wanted to definitely get into. Can we talk a little bit about Quasi MIDI and getting a little bit more into what your role was over there and the instruments that you created and how that translated over to Radical? Because Quasi MIDI was pretty well known, and Well respected for sure. I mean, Revolution, you know, some of those since what was it, the Raven, and what was the other one? You guys had a really cool synth. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
We had the Sirius, maybe you are talking about that. So it's a little keyboard with a 309 inside and
Polymorph.
full section.
Polymorph.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about some of that stuff?
Yeah, so Quasimidi was a very small company until they developed rhythm cards for Roland keyboards with German polka and German waltz and stuff like that. So we wanted to create a new synth, but we had no money to do that. So we first had this idea of doing rhythm cards for Roland keyboards, and they sold very well. So there are a lot of entertainers in Germany who use these Starcards for their keyboards, and so that gave us the opportunity to develop a synthesizer. So without that, Quasimidi would not even exist, you know. So that was the main idea we had in, I think, yeah, in the beginning of the 90s. And so when we first, at the beginning, we thought about creating, it's really funny, a kind of semi-modular synth. So I already talked with Dirk Matten from Synthesizer Studio Bonn about that. I met him in Bochum, and I discussed my front panel of that and the modules which are inside and so on. But then a new developer joined us at Quasimidi, and he was experienced with the Dream DSPs, and he brought us to the other idea, because this analog synth, we were not sure if this is really mass compatible what we are doing, because it was a time where no one played modular systems, you know. It was a complete different time then. And so we Jörg Reichstein, the president of the company, had then the idea to do an sample-based synth, but sample all kinds of different vintage synthesizers and put at least 1,000 new sounds into this unit. That was our job, because we only had about, I don't know how much it was, I think 48 megabytes or something like this sample material. And so we put all these sounds into the machine, but at the same time, he also wanted us to do an GS standard, so that it's also compatible with our entertainers. And so it was a mixed product. So on the one hand, it was for techno producers, the Quasar. So this is not the Zeus, the Quasar I'm talking about, the first synthesizer we ever made. I would love to send you a picture of that, but
I'm showing this Sirius right now.
so maybe
Which
yeah. So that's a complete other. That was one of our latest machines, and
yeah, that was later on. I was trying to see if the Quasar is up here, but yeah, that's the Sirius.
the first step into this world was the Quasar, and that's the reason I'm talking about that, because it was more just normal sample-based synth expander as a 19-inch synth, and it was not clear in which direction Quasimidi will go. Still work with the entertainers or doing more stuff with techno musicians. And so, but the advertising was about there are up sounds inside and Moog sounds inside and Roland sounds inside. There were also samples. Most of the samples I did within 4 months and from a German tech magazine. And yeah, so it became a little bit popular, this synth. So we sold about 1,000 units of that, and that was a very happy accident for us. So we were not sure if it would be successful, but that gave us the opportunity to go further. And then we came into this music machine stuff, because the Quasar was much more used by techno musicians than by entertainers. And so we focused more on this techno genre, and we created special ROM boards for the Quasar with specialized sounds on it. And these sounds were then later used also for a little box, the Technox expander. And this Technox was already more focused to the synth and trance genre than the Quasar was. So all the synthesizer stuff was in the Technox, and the Quasar was more the for everyone, something for everyone with 1,000 different sounds in it.
And
And so
that was the rack unit, right?
that was also rec unit, the Technox. So
Yeah.
it was not so. I think we did not. No, we sold it in the US. I'm not sure, but I think not so many. It was more popular in England and in Germany and in France and so on. And then we started to do the Raven. Then first we thought we were building a groove box. It was before even the Roland groove box was available. So we thought we'd do something small, but then we realized that these simple little buttons from what we choose for our instruments were more expensive than keyboard keys on FATA keyboards. So we thought maybe we should do a keyboard. So that was the Raven then. The Raven had all the sounds of the Technox and had a lot of styles. So it was a machine where we start to think about we need to compete not only with other synthesizer companies, we have to compete with everything what the youth wants to have. So, for example, with a surfbrett or with an or with vacation or whatever. So we thought we do something what is really absolutely simple, where people can just randomize patterns and create new patterns just by pushing one button, and even creating a complete song by just pushing one button. And then they have a new techno song and can demonstrate it to their girlfriend or something like this. So it was just a fun machine. And after you saved some of these patterns, it was possible to jam around with them. So to select patterns on the fly and do mutings and soloing and playing along with it and so on. And it was quite successful, this Raven keyboard. So it was then a kind of techno keyboard, specialized. And yeah, then we started developing the polymorph, I think. But the polymorph was delayed by the fact that it sounded like shit in the beginning. So we can't publish that with that engine, because at the beginning it was just only a kind of no, I'm not getting the things for it. A virtual analog synth, but the limits of the Dream DSPs did not allow us to work in a way that we have free running oscillators and stuff like that. And it just sounded not good. It just simply still sounded like an Rompler with little waveforms more than like an modular synth, analog synth. So, and then I said, then let us do a special waveform chip, especially for the polymorph, so that it works with these little waveforms, but also with larger waveforms with multi-samples and stuff like that. That's also the reason why there is a mellotron sound inside. So it's simply sampled. But I sampled also Moog sequencer sounds with the mini Moog I had and stuff like that, and put that as a multi-sample into it. And so it sounded then not so bad, but if we put then this sequencing engine into it, and that was also made very simple, so you could assign a line of sequence just by turning a knob on the surface, and then you could create really easily sequences with moving filter curves and stuff like that, and that was quite popular as well. So
Now, what kind of power under the hood was it? I mean, was it difficult to work within, the limited DSP that you had, or was that just because the way the original engine was written, it was just not
we
written?
worked a lot on, so the developers worked a lot on the engine, but it was just the DSP power was limited, and this DSP was specialized on a lot of polyphony and sample playback, but it was not in any way. So we had to rewrite the original code which came from the company, and we we put together two parts to get one part out of it to realize two different filters at a time and something like this. So a lot of stuff had to be developed by us, but there was a problem in, for example, in the DSP. It was not only DSP, it was in DSP plus a microcontroller in one package, and the envelopes of the synth engine were calculated in this microcontroller, and for that reason, there were a lot of steps in these envelopes, and that sounded not good. So it sounded much better if you put then samples of sequencer sound into it. So I always try to get a good sound out of the electronics, and if that does not work, then I'm skipping it away, you know. So and the polymorph was just made with an hardware which wasn't capable of doing a really good sounding engine. So for that reason, and the Sirius came then before the polymorph came out, just because we believed more into the Sirius then, because it was sample based and was easier to create some patterns that are sounding good than on the polymorph. And so we put out the Sirius and then the polymorph, and then already the end of Quasi-MIDI started, you know.
Well, the really thing is about all of those instruments. I mean, you kind of downplay the sound of the polymorph and whatnot. But if you look at all the Quasi-MIDI stuff, they all have really high ratings on all the sites, like rave reviews. I mean, people, you know, at the time, especially, people really enjoyed these instruments. I mean, like, these were not anything to sneeze at. I mean, these are all DSP based instruments that kind of at the time were really making a name for themselves, and people were like, and one of the major aspects of it is a lot of these had a lot of knobs on them, whereas at that same time, not a lot of digital synths had a ton of knobs on them at the time. So
it's very possible, but you know, if you are satisfied with your product, you can't develop anything new and better.
Amen. See, and that's
I never really was satisfied with any of these Quasi-MIDI products. So it was for me really nice to meet then Andreas Tofan with Radikal Technologies, because he has completely other horizon of opportunities, because he's simply a genius in my opinion. And if I want to have something what really sounds good, then he can implement that much better than anyone who worked for Quasi-MIDI.
And who is that again?
Andreas Tofan is the name of the guy.
Okay.
He's a universal talent. He also developed, for example, the Windows driver of the Uniter interfaces from Imagic in the past. Just as one example, he also was the main developer behind the Venom synthesizer. That was more low-cost synthesizer, so it has not the same capability. It was also based on the Dream chip, but with Radikal Technologies, we always try to use the latest technology and the most powerful DSPs, and then we are always focusing on sound and not on voices. So if a good sounding synth has only one voice, then it's still a good sounding synth, but a synth with 64 voice, which sounds like shit, you can't use for anything. So for that reason, we are always focusing on the sound of synth engine.
Yeah. So how did you link up with him? And was that was that before Radikal?
No. He joined Radikal in the second year or in the third year, when we already had the control surface out. So we built a control surface with motor faders.
Yeah. I was looking at those today. They actually still sell for a good bit on eBay.
Yeah, maybe. So it was quite popular for a while, but it died instantly when the Mackie control came out, just because it was cheaper, and most stores then presented only the Mackie control, and the logic control. But however, he joined the team because the guy who did the developing at Quasar and also at Radikal in the beginning was really new to USB, and he could not really write the drivers for USB. And so, and we wanted to have USB and the controller because we also had a USB hub and stuff like that on. And we needed them. We were searching then for a new developer. And then a guy who's not living anymore, unfortunately, at EES in Mölln, he was a developer for media interface and stuff, that he recommended us to contact Andreas Trofan. And that was really amazing. So I just remember the day where I told him that I'm bringing him the developing system. So it's some kind of emulator and software program and the development board of the SSC2K controller. And you must know that the SSC controller is a very complex piece of hardware shit. You know, it has about so it has 8 motor faders, and then it has multiple panel boards, so circuit boards for the encoders, 3 of them, and then it has one main board, and it has one board where the jog wheel is and all this stuff, and the digital connections are all going through the whole unit with ribbon cables, and so the addresses are just going up from one board to the next board with a control logic. And so it is, if you have never seen the circuit diagram, and you must also know Eagle had only the option to see one circuit board at once, so you could not see the overall schematics of the whole unit. You only saw the schematic of one of the boards. And you know, I gave it to him. He's living very close to me, about half an hour car drive from here, and I gave it to him. And I returned home. And when I returned home, I cooked him coffee, and then I went into my studio, and then I was sitting there about 20 minutes doing something. And then I received a phone call of Andreas, and he asked me if I want to try something. I said, what? And then he sent me his first firmware, where an animation of all the LEDs on the servers, which are running over a lot of different circuit boards, were showing up like a kind of Christmas LED animation or something like that, you know, was running over the whole unit. And I just was totally blown away. And 1 week later, he already made the faders moving much smoother, developed the USB firmware, realized that there was a fault on the hardware as well, and wrote the first version of the Windows driver, and it was already working after a week or so. And he made this what the other developer formerly worked a year on or something like that, you know. It was really totally amazing.
That's
you know,
one of those things.
When I told him we need motor faders, if you ever develop something like motor control, and he said, oh yeah, I did something for my son for his train, for his model train, you know. So he programmed then a new control for the speed of the trains on this model Märklin train system. I don't know. Yeah, however, and he, you know, and we started then later. I was not satisfied. I really didn't want to do control surface. I always thought it's much easier to sell products which have an audio output.
So he's but that's all control stuff. But he's also doing DSP work as well.
Yeah, so he started then with that, you know.
Yeah, see, that's ridiculous, because a lot of the times when you have a developer, they're either control or they're DSP, and a lot of the times it's not both.
You know, the guy, I just must tell you another story. So he did in the 90s, he did computer games, and he also programmed emulators for example, an game emulator for a PC system, and so he emulated also the sound chip of this gaming console. That was the only thing he ever did in DSP programming, you know. and it was an 4-operator FM synth. He did especially for his game engine. And
Oh,
it's really
nice.
funny. And he also had one time, so at one CeBIT, I don't know if you know CeBIT, was in computer fair in Germany. It was very popular. He had a booth there with an operating system, a graphical operating system, even before Windows came out. It had a really terrible name. It was called Carrot, like you know what? Yeah,
A carrot.
and it had Windows with where you can move applications and stuff like that on a DOS system. You know, it was even before Windows came out. It was even before the Macintosh came out, maybe with Windows, and but it looked like shit. You know, that was a little problem of that, but it was working. You know.
Well, technically, Windows looked like shit back then too. So,
Yeah. So
and it kind of still does, but
yeah, and this guy, and then we talked about doing synthesizers again for Radikal Technologies. Cheers. It's my non-alcoholic white Russian for the younger people. What's in me for the older people? It's in white Russian.
yeah, mine is an alcoholic whiskey. So,
Yes. So, however, and I thought about, you know, I visited, I'm now coming again to Dirk Matten of the synthesizer studio, but it was a very popular synthesizer store in the 90s and 80s and 70s. And I had the chance, when I was there with quasi-MIDI stuff, he had a model 15 of Moog there, and there was a fixed filter bank inside the synthesizer. And I never heard before a fixed filter bank. And I asked him if he can show it to me. Your dog is barking. Oh, yeah. Or was it you?
no, it's not me yet. I'll be doing that later after a little bit more whiskey. But no, I'm having it's a holiday in the States. It's Memorial Day weekend, so we've got some festivities that are getting ready to be underway, and I'm dog sitting for a bunch of dogs, and yeah, so they're going nuts.
You know, as a synth developer, every day is a holiday. Because you can play the machine every day. No, but what I wanted to say, so I was at Synthesizer Studio Bonn, and Dirk Matten presented me then the fixed filter bank, and he simply put noise into it and raised up the different filter bands. I think you know what a filter bank is. So
yeah, absolutely.
Pass filters with volume control after each, so VCA after each, and then you could control the different frequencies. It sounded so awesome, and I instantly had the idea, oh, we need something which does that does an automatic animation of this level control. So to have a sequencer that controls the level of the different filter bands. And I had this idea because Jürgen asked me, okay, if you want to do something with sound, what do you want to do? There are so many synths and so many drum machines out there. Do you have any new idea or something like that? And I said, yes, I would like to do a sequencer controlled filter bank. And so I built one at my so that is also something I developed. Nothing from what I developed there really went into the Spectralist, but the concept.
Well, hold on. Before you dive too deep into that, so when you say you developed it, is this is this digital or is this analog?
No, but what I developed these days was just analog. It was an analog fixed filter bank and a very simple step sequencer that controlled a lot of VCAs based on the SSM 2164 VCA chip. We are still using that chip for our multimode filter. But I used the VCAs and the filter banks, and then I had a little sequencer with a lot of trim potentiometers where I could control the volume for each step on the sequence for each filter band. And then I created really totally new sounds out of it, and I presented that to Jürgen Kortlich, who is the owner of Radikal Technologies, as a concept, you know. So I just wanted to let him hear what I trying to do. And he was blown away, and he said, okay, So you can do that. And so the first version of it was called Spectral. It was just only the sequencer, but the sequencer was already then developed by Andreas Hofan, who programmed it simply in a microcontroller. And the first version of the Spectrum also had analog filters, which were based on my fretboard design, what I did at home. So it sounded, so at the first day at the music messe, there was no sound coming out of it, no fucking sound.
Oh, that's always good.
Because something was not ready yet. And on the next day, so I worked the whole night to the next day. At the next day, already tones came out of it, but the tones were not very good. And I then thought I need an additional low-pass filter that I can do some post-processing. So I'm controlling this low-pass filter as well. And I have a spectrum from the filter bank which changes, but I have the opportunity to reduce the overtones because it was always sounding a little bit harsh to me. And then on the third day on the music messe, it sounded you already got really nice sounds out of it. But
so these were changes that were happening each night. Like you would leave music messe and then you would make these changes.
Yeah, I was soldering a low pass filter then at night.
And these are all this was all analog.
Yeah. And the best thing about it, this box looked like shit, you know. At home, I thought, oh, that is a really smart design. I really liked it. And when I put it onto the booth at the music mess and saw all the other units, I thought, oh, it looks really awful. It's really worst looking synthesizer I ever saw in my life. And but however, so that is also the reason I changed the design totally. And also I thought just a filter bank with a sequencer is such a specialized project that we would not sell so many of them. And so for that reason, I changed my mind totally and thought, okay, we are doing a synth engine with a fixed filter bank, with a sequencer, but we add also a sample-based engine to do something more for the mainstream, to add the opportunity to really produce music with the synthesizer. And that is the, because that it changed to the Spectralis then. So from Spectron to Spectralis. I'm very sorry that I have no picture of it. I really would like.
I'm showing one right now.
No, from the Spectron. I really would love to
from the Spectrum. Okay.
This crappy design because it really looks so awful. You must see that.
Well, hold on. I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story as well. So the first time that I met you, and I've told you this story before, and I don't know if you recall it, but the first time I actually met you was at NAMM when you were debuting the Accelerator. And I came up there with St. Joe from soundsandgear.com, who's a dear friend of mine. And we walked up to the booth, and at that show, we had seen a few different synthesizers, but we were both pretty curious about the Accelerator. And before that, we had a run-in with a couple other synthesizer guys, well-known synthesizer producers that, in my opinion, were pretty snobby. And, we weren't really super fond of like the way they were demoing their products, and they were kind of cagey about some of the deeper questions and whatnot. So we come up to the Radikal booth and we see the Accelerator, and both Joe and I are kind of like, ooh, this looks a little expensive and a little nicely built and pretty fancy. And we're kind of like ogling a little bit. And you started demoing the synthesizer for us a bit, and you told us that it had an accelerometer in it to where you could pick the synth up and, you could modulate by raising and lowering the synth. And my initial reaction was, the fuck is this guy thinking? Like, it makes no goddamn sense. I was like, I'm not going to pick up a multi-$1,000 synthesizer and risk dropping it. And I said that to you. And I said, what about dropping the synthesizer? Aren't you worried about it? And you pick this thing up. Keep in mind, this is at NAMM where you're demonstrating these synthesizers to multiple people. Shit has to work. And you take it off the stand and you were like, it's fucking built in Germany. And you dropped it from like 4 feet up and it just smashed on the ground. And I just about leapt out of my chest. I said, what the hell? And he picked it up, he set it back on the table, and it worked perfectly. And I said, this guy's fucking crazy. I love it. And that from that day forward, I've been a complete fan because no one else had the balls to do anything like that, let alone create a synthesizer that has such a oddball ass modulation source as tilting the entire keyboard. And then the fact that, I mean, this thing had wood, if I recall correctly, it had like wood ends on it, like, and metal body. Like it's nothing to, like, I would not just go throwing a synthesizer like that around, and you just chucked it.
Yeah, it's show business, you know. It's all show business.
It was beautiful though. And then you picked it up and you put it back on the table, and then you proceeded to continue giving us a demo, and it sounds amazing. I don't think we got the drop on video, but if you go to YouTube, if you go to soundsandgear.com and look up Accelerator, Radikal Technologies Accelerator, you'll see the interview from that time. I don't know if we got the drop on there or not. What's that?
Unfortunately, I never saw this.
Yeah, so that video is up there. I don't know if the drop is on there or not, but the interview that we did from that NAMM show, I know, is still up on YouTube. And yeah, it man, I'll tell you what, that's a cool ass synthesizer too.
Thank you.
Now, that one, is that still in production, or did you just end production on that like last year or what?
4 years ago or so.
Is that long ago?
It was really not really successful, unfortunately.
I think that one was one of the ones where I didn't see it in a ton of shops out here either, distribution wise.
But the main problem is it had not enough knobs, I think, for people.
That is one of the things that I look at on that, and this goes back to kind of the Spectralis and the Quasi-MIDI stuff having a lot of knobs, and that one doesn't have a lot of knobs on it. But it is kind of a player's keyboard because it does have a lot of modulation sources, and the engine in it's pretty intense.
Yeah, it had a lot of live features like song chains, and so that you can just load a song, and then you are pushing only the next button to get the different presets of your song, and it could collect everything, performances, single sounds, and simple split sounds and stuff, just by hitting the next button, or to select them directly on buttons 0 to 9. So it had the opportunity to access the sounds much faster than on most keyboards, but especially this feature was not successful because people did not get the trick. I don't know why.
If I recall,
people now from other keyboards, okay, I'm enter a 3-digit number and push enter, and then it calls the sound. And we never had something because we did not like that. So we had banks and we had patches like on the Jupiter 8 and stuff like that. We had also implement then a next button where you can just jump through the different presets with next and with the last one or whatever.
Yeah, if I recall, we discussed this, and I believe in the video, it was really like a stage performer synthesizer. It was something that you could create really deep patches on it, but it was really aimed at like the live performer. Yeah. And that was you actually I was fortunate enough to hear some of the music from the other day, and you were using it. You were using the accelerator in some of that music as well, and you can definitely tell, like when you're playing on that, you're getting these beautiful chord structures and melodies coming out of it. The Spectralis, you did 2 versions of that, right? Now the second version had more sample time. I think it was like 4 gigabytes or something like that.
So you know the reason for the second Spectralist was, first thing was the USB chip were not produced anymore, so we had to change the hardware anyway. The second reason was smart media cards were not available anymore, so we had to create a new memory interface for it. And so we wanted to have a parallel interface, so we choose then compact flash cards instead of smart media, and that already gave us the opportunity to just put more memory into it. So with a FAT16 file system, you can access a maximum of 4 gigabytes. That's the reason why it has 4 gigabytes of memory. And there was another reason. So when we built the hardware controller, the SLC, we bought this custom-made buttons for it from a Switzerland company, and we had a contract with them to take each month a bunch of buttons, you know. So we also had a special price for it. And then when the Mackie control came out, we could not sell anymore these buttons. So we put these buttons into the Spectralist to use them, because we had then thousands of buttons of these buttons. And when the Spectralist one had to be changed, the buttons were not available. We already used all the buttons we had to take, and so we had the opportunity to build it in a cheaper way. So with other buttons, also with more practical buttons, because I like these buttons much more, because if you, for example, enter 16th steps on a hi-hat, it's much easier to just put the finger onto the Spectralist and move it along the different buttons to enter 16th. The other buttons were concave. I don't know if in English. So it was not really easy to do that on the Spectralist one. So it was much more handy. And we also changed the displays and so on. So the Spectralist 2 was also, we also thought about, okay, when we now we have so many differences, we should then do a complete other look, because with another look, it's a new product, you know. So the synth engine was still the same, but we had more samples inside, and people don't need any memory cards anymore. That was the main difference. But the sound wise, it's the same, completely the same engine like the Spectralist one. And also the production costs were lower than on the Spectralist one.
So the Spectralis, I never actually had hands on one, but everyone that I know that has had one has said a couple of different things. I've seen people talk about, one, it being difficult to use, but two, I've heard a lot of people say that it's like amazing and crazy deep, and you can do like so many different things, so many different modulations, and create really interesting sequences with it. Can you tell us a little bit about the sequencer itself and how that interacts, and how that, because really, so your newer products, they take some of the development from Spectralis, but they put it into like modular form. But that all relies on a external sequencer. So that was like the last really deep sequencer that you guys have done, right?
Yeah, that's true. So for us, the sequencer was part of the hybrid synth engine in the beginning. So we thought a modular system always has a step sequencer inside. So we added a step sequencer first just for the hybrid synth. In the beginning, it was impossible to trigger the sample-based synths with the step sequencer. The sample-based synth had its own sequencing engine. There was a pattern sequencer like on the Quasar MIDI stuff in the past. So with different patterns and the opportunity to mute and demute and soloing tracks and to jam with all the patterns you have entered and to transpose them. And the step sequencer was controlling parameters as well. So it was mostly designed to create this filter bank animations. and we really, yeah, I wanted to have something which is like a modular system, but completely programmable. For that reason, we had yeah, to switch fast from one patch to another. It was important for us to have a fixed structure of the synth engine. So you know the Clavier modular, you have modules, and each patch can be completely different because each patch has a different number of modules, and the number of nodes is changing depending on how many modules you are using in a patch. And that had a little disadvantage. Switching from one patch to another always took a little bit time because it completely reloads the complete DSP engine at the Clavier Nord modular. And I wanted to have something which switches from one pattern to another with a complete different modular patch. And that was only possible by doing all the connections with VCAs. So I'm calling it VCAs because it was DSP based, so it were not like VCAs, but a kind of of VCA. So we put just attenuators, I can call it between everything. So you could mix the different oscillators into different filters independent. You could route the filters via VCAs to the output or to the filter bank. From the filter bank, you could route it back to the low pass filter. So you could create even feedback loops in the engine from the oscillator over the low pass filter into the filter bank and back over the multimode filter into the low pass filter as a loop. It's a completely strange stuff, and it even switches from pattern to pattern from one modular setup to the next. So I thought that is the next step to modular, and to make it feel like a modular system, we put LFOs everywhere, you know. So we have LFOs for each oscillator. You have independent LFOs for pitch and for the waveform, for example. And you have LFOs for the filter frequency, and you have LFOs for additional LFOs which can be routed free into almost free inside the engine. The master LFOs, just 4 LFOs, additionally to the LFOs which are already in there. So
I
that
mean,
makes
you're talking a lot
really
about designing it in a way that's similar to modular. And before you were kind of harkening back to Model 15 modular stuff. But this is all really before like Eurorack had not even come close to taking off at this point. Like it really wasn't
it
in
wasn't
the
it wasn't
it wasn't the music industry baby that it is now, you know. Like now it's
Mhm.
kind of all the rage, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But back then, modular was still kind of like in the back of people's mind, like not at the forefront.
Uh,
What is it about the modular stuff that was, you know, and even the Nord modular that kind of made you think about that kind of stuff when you're creating things? I mean, is that something that you were using back then, or you just like the idea of like anything can modulate anything, or what?
Yes, I really liked already modular synthesizer. So I had one already in the 90s when I designed the sounds for Quasar Media. I had this Foreman system and one Baumann system, and I created almost all multi-samples just with them. So for example, the TB303 sounds of the Quasar Media synths were based on the Foreman. It was just using the low pass filter in 18 dB setting and
Hmm.
the oscillator and then multi-sampling it. And so it was not a replacement for TB303 at all, but it was an opportunity for people who can't afford that to use it a little bit in the way that it sounds, a little bit in the way it sounds. But I'm really more the modular guy. You know, when I for the first time heard about synthesizers, it was in the 70s, and I saw then pictures of Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schulze and all this big modular stuff. And I was really frustrated to go into a music store, and there was nothing like that anymore. It was already past, you know, it was not. But I think the first music messe in Frankfurt I ever visited, Roland had still the System 100 modules on a big system, but it was the last time they ever did that. It was frustrating for me because I have also a technical background. I was always interested in electronics, and for me, a modular system was a perfect thing, you know. But it came back then much later than I was interested in that. So for that reason, I started then to build little circuits by myself. For me, it was not like a commercial product. It was so I did that in the 70s and the 80s.
It was just DIY stuff.
Yeah, stuff like we did not call it like that in the past, you know.
Now, were you researching this stuff through forum? Well, no, I guess you're saying back in the 70s, right?
Yeah, it was really, yeah, it was.
Okay, so you were you doing mail order or what?
I did not, no, I did not build really oscillators like we have them today. I just created generators which can produce audio, for example.
Okay. So like signal generators that were not control voltage.
That modulate each other, but not within volt per active. Just
yeah,
you know, fun creating crazy sounds. It was not nothing what you can really use for a musical instrument, but what I was interested into creating sounds. It was just in the beginning. I could not afford any synthesizer when I was young, you know. So I had soldering iron and and put some circuits into it. Electro was a nice magazine to get knowledge of.
Electro Notes.
Yeah, no, Electro. It's
okay.
The magazine which also presented this for months in this other I talked about. So I have one in my studio downstairs. This is the same, still the same. I also used for the sampling. So I was already really I loved modular synthesizers, and then when Döpfer came out with it, I first found it a little bit funny. You know, I never expected that it would become successful again. You know, so I don't know why. So it's just developed over the years. Maybe the main reason why it's so successful is for sure that it is just much cheaper than it was in the 70s.
Yeah, it's much cheaper and it's easy for guys in their garage to get involved because all you don't have to worry about getting regulation or anything for a power supply because that's already done, you know.
Yeah.
So you can just get a flat piece of metal, a circuit board, and some standoffs and create something. And so the barrier to entry is extremely low. So on that level, it's really interesting. I think it's interesting how many people have Eurorack systems that don't have dope for stuff in them. Even though that was like the beginning of it. I still think that I'm of the mindset that a rising tide, lifts all boats. So even if maybe not everybody has dope for products in their Eurorack, there's still more people now aware of it that are going to end up buying dope for products and buying Radikal and buying Make Noise and whatever. So the more people that get involved, whether it's because I see some people are worried about like major companies like Roland and Korg or whatever. What if they start making modules or even Behringer? And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, it's like it's different price points and different different products are going to speak to different people. So the more people involved, the more products rise up and there's more awareness. Because if you look at modular as a market for music industry, it's still very, very small. Like it's still a very small amount of people that are buying Eurorack modules, even though it's getting probably the majority of the press right now as far as music technology is concerned. Like you see more Eurorack products and advertisements and YouTube influencer stuff, all that kind of things, all that advertisement. You see more of that than you see of like something like, a desktop module of like a Chaos Pad or a desktop synthesizer or whatever, whereas, a few years ago, it would have been totally opposite of that, just like 5 years ago, it would have been completely different.
But the point is just, so we have the Delta Step A as an Eurorack synth.
Well, before we get to the Delta Step A, you started with other modules first. And
I just want, I'm just coming with that because of you said about desktop synth, tabletop synth, and Eurorack stuff. So we are selling much more of the tabletop units of the desktop synth.
oh yeah,
Than the Eurorack version. So that is the same what you are saying, that it's just still a small market, Eurorack. So even that it's 300 bucks more than the Eurorack version, we are selling much more of the tabletop. Because people like it that it is in just a unit as it's for itself, so you can just take it and put it on stage without carrying a big case or without worrying about anything. It has normal connectors, so you can just connect it with the regular jacks and stuff like that.
yeah, and that's something that I've been actually championing to a few different manufacturers for a few years now. Is I kept telling people, I said, Eurorack is one thing, and I get it, and I love it too. I mean, I have Eurorack, but the bigger aspect of it to me, like the more important draw is less that it fits in your rack and more the fact that it has control voltage over a lot of different things,
Yes.
because people enjoy control voltage versus MIDI. Like there's definite use cases and wonderful things about MIDI, and there's definite use cases and wonderful things about control voltage, and especially when you combine the two. So my thing is like, desktop modules that have a lot of CV are beautiful products, and people, and even rack mount units, because I'm starting to see a push more in the community where people are saying, oh, I really wish that desktop module had come out with rack ears because I've run out of desk space. And it's like, so it's kind of going full circle back to 19-inch rack. And you're like, oh, well, if you drop a 19-inch rack unit, you should probably put some control voltage inputs on the front, like, and I haven't seen much of that being done yet. But I guarantee you're going to see in the next couple years, you're going to start seeing rack mount units that have control voltage inputs on the front.
Sure. And it's really fun because everyone I gave the Delta Step A so far, everyone creates complete different sounds with it. And I just sold it to a friend of mine, and she connected the what was it? The output of the oscillator, I think. No, the output of the filter, and she connected it to the attack control voltage of the envelope generator, and was really thinking about why you should do that. But it gives a kind of randomness to it, because every time it triggers, the envelope gets triggered, it has a little bit different value on the attack rate, and so it changed the sound a little bit, gives just a little bit more liveness into it. If you are
And these are patch points.
You would not do this connection if you maybe when you are a synth geek.
Yeah, if you're in a mod matrix, it's going to take you extra steps,
Yeah, you would do maybe take the random output of the LFO and connect this instead of the other output. But she just, but just by trying it, and get a nice result, she was just proud about it, and would say, okay, you give new inspiration to do stuff what you normally would not do, just because it makes, at the end, everything makes sense, what you are doing there. And that's what they called at Synthplex. They had a lot of different workshops where they talked about happy accidents. So that's something, just something happens and a sound evolves what you have not expected, but it's just good and you're just recording it. And it isn't a happy accident, but it's something new and something good. And for that reason, what you said before, the opportunity to work with control voltages is simply perfect for happy accidents, or for something that goes into a direction you could not expect or you would not use, or whatever, just patching it. So if you have a baby, just give it some cables, should connect some cables.
Oh, I do it. I've got. Hey, listen, Ollie is my little 4-year-old, and yeah, he's my random patch generator and also my analog fart generator. So I have that too. But yeah, like that's the thing about control voltage is it's so immediate that you can definitely try connections that you wouldn't normally think of, and also you can do things like using things that are maybe logic or whatever, but using them for audio. So you can do things that maybe wouldn't be intended on a typical synth design. So when you have a desktop module that has control voltage over all these different parts broken out, you get the benefit of, oh, well, I have MIDI and I can control it from my DAW, or I can control it from my MPC or whatever sequencer you're using. And then you also still have that immediacy. So it's kind of a win-win. I have a comment in here from J Rod, Ohio, who basically said that he just bought a Delta Sep A and he got the desktop version because he didn't have room in his rack for a for the Delta Sep A. And it got me instantly thinking. So 4MS makes a really cool case called the pods, which are for like individual Eurorack modules, and you can keep them on your desk and they take up very little space and whatnot. But the price that you're selling the Delta Sep A desktop versus the rack unit costs about the same, if not maybe even a little bit less than it would cost to buy a separate case for it, except this thing's angled specifically for it. Like you get some added benefits. So it kind of makes total sense to buy the desktop version, you know?
Sure. It makes absolutely a lot of sense to buy it. I can tell you. And really trust me.
Yeah. No bias, right? Completely unbiased opinion on this.
Yeah.
So let's get into a little bit about the modules. So what was the first Eurorack module that you guys produced?
And it was the analog filter, so the RT451. That is based on the analog multimode filter in the Spectralis, which I designed, when we developed the Spectralis. So I thought we also need a multimode filter, and I was not interested to recreate a multimode filter that already exists. I thought I'd do something new because I really like to have different filter responses. So I think a filter which sounds different from other filters is a better benefit for us than a filter that sounds like an ARP filter, like Modular, because they already existing, So why should I design something like that as a clone or something?
So are you telling me that as a Eurorack manufacturer, you're not making a clone?
No.
How dare you?
Yeah, sure. I'm very sorry for that. And also, I never understood why modular synths mainly were mono, because a sound just lives with two speakers, I think. If there's a movement in the room of the sound, it sounds just much, much better. So for that reason, I created a dual filter module. And so you can use it also in a serial configuration to get other filter responses, but the main thing is using it in stereo with a little bit difference between white and
And that's what the coupler does, right?
It's much better. And for that reason, it has a dedicated knob here, a big knob in the middle of it, and this controls both filters.
Yeah, the coupler.
And also the control voltages. If you don't connect anything to the second filter, the control voltage of the first filter will control the second too. It's like controlling the big knob from a control voltage. So people are sometimes complaining, why can't you control the big knob on top of it? And
by CV?
I told them so often that it is absolutely the same if you connect a control voltage to one of these inputs of the first filter. They will control the second filter as well, and they're doing exactly the same like you do when moving here the knob, but people don't get it. I don't know why. So it's they still think there should be another control voltage input for the big knob, independent from the fact that it's really doing the same stuff, you know, so it makes no difference for me. But however, it's maybe I should add a labeling here on these that they are going to the coupler. If you, but then I have to write also if you don't connect anything into these inputs. You know?
Well, then you also run into the issue of Eurorack users seem to be very particular about how their panels look. And if you do anything that somebody doesn't like, you lose sales because they're like, oh, it's not this color, it's not that color. Oh, it has too many lines on it. Oh, it's got a lightning bolt. Like I've noticed that the Eurorack community is very strange as far as like some people want things to look very unique, some people want things to look very uniform. You know, aesthetically speaking, Eurorack is a strange beast because it's already a niche product, and then people want to segment it even further by, oh, I want it all black face plates, I want it all gray face plates, I want this, I want that, and yeah.
You
So
know,
that's
my decision was just I made something which looks so shitty that you will recognize it on the first view on any modular system. And there are really pictures of modular systems out there where everything is black and then somewhere is this orange fucking stupid filter. And so the people see, oh, what is this? That's the only thing you really see is there is something orange which has some kind of ball onto it or whatever it can be, or it looks like a note or whatever. And then they are looking further maybe. So I just wanted to have something that get a little bit attention, you know. So that's the reason for this design. And I changed my opinion a lot with the oscillator then. And then I changed it again for the FX unit. And I think the FX unit has already the design of the Delta Set A, and I really like the combination out of black and blue, and then these this chrome knobs. What I always love because they looking like knobs Tension Dream already had in the 70s.
well, it makes me ask the question then, because the other modules kind of all have that same blue and black look. Are you going to do a panel for the filter that's blue and black as well?
I don't know. Do you think we should? If I would do that, I would create a different filter, maybe with different colors. But I think
Well, I'll say that I'll say this
be.
much, and this is just because I'm the kind of guy who, just like you, when you said, you know, if you're complacent, if you say that something is good enough, then you're not progressing further. So my thought process on it would be, I would like to see another filter. I'm sure that filter sounds amazing. I haven't actually used it. But what I would like to see is maybe a dual filter that is one half digital, one half analog. Um, that's what I would like to see from Radikal.
Okay. But this is really for a filter. It's hard because if you use the DSP,
I didn't ask if it was hard. I said
just,
do it.
no. Just if you do something like this with a DSP just for a filter, you know, you are creating a really expensive product because
You are.
only the DSP. You need a lot of peripherals around the DSP and a much more complicated circuit board. And then you have also work with digital and analog signals on one very little circuit board, and it's much more complicated.
So this is where we get into the conversation of what the product should be, though, and then it becomes more interesting because to me, if you had a hybrid filter that is both analog and digital, you don't the digital side, you don't try to just emulate the analog side. To me, the digital side, you do things such as comb filtering. You know, you do modal synthesis in it. You could do carpless strong with it. Like you know, at that point it becomes more than that, you know. So you could have one side being filter banking and, you know, doing lots of interesting things, and the other side being like an analog multi. But I'm not gonna get too deep into all of this.
But what you mentioned is just the FX module, you know, where you have filters a lot of different filters, digital filters, and you have also this carpless strong module inside. You have reverberation
You're
inside.
talking about the Delta Sep?
No, the FX.
Oh, the FX. Yeah, yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is so you did the effects module, and the effects module has you've got delays on there, you've got reverbs on there, but you do have digital filters as well. Where are those digital filter models coming from? Are they pulled from your other products? Or are they new, or what is that all about?
So we are always developing it a little bit further. When the technology grows, our algorithms are growing as well. So, and you will realize that the best filters at the moment, the best digital filters we have are in the DataSet A and then the FX module, because they are running on a new generation of DSPs. And so we can do more oversampling, we can do a steeper filtering of to avoid aliasing and stuff like that. So this is really, most people think this is just analog. So if you hear that, it's just I know, over the phone. It sounds terrible for sure, but it's but it just sounds better than a lot of analog filters. You know, it's a new DSP based filters, and they're much better than they were on the accelerator, for example. So it's
See that, and that's kind of what I love hearing is that every time I talk to you, you're kind of excited about like, oh, okay, well, we have this new model and we've been doing this and we've been doing that. And it's not like, oh, we're pulling, 10-year-old DSP code and just slapping it in there, which by and of itself, those filters were cool. But the fact that you're not just complacent in that and that you're pushing something forward on that, there's a lot of value to that I don't think people are always aware of,
Oh, thank you. The point is just I know already the 10-year-old filter, so I really want to have a new one. So
well, and that's the thing is that you're a music creator. You're not just creating the products, but you actually make music. So, you have that unique perspective of someone who's making music saying, okay, well, I have this tone already. I want to do something new.
That's the point, yeah. And I think people should select stuff like that, so they should always look to get their own sound, to get their own unique sound. And I think it's better to go to something what is not used by everyone. So why should we now use again, or almost in every piece, a sound where you on the first listening to it already hear, oh, that sounds like a Minimoog. So why should we do that? So
I totally agree.
that is the thing of Eurek. Everyone, so by combining different modules from different manufacturers, you have the total freedom to create your own synthesizer by choosing different stuff. You can really get your individual sound, and that's for the artists. That is the opportunity what Eurek gives. So you are not using a workstation, or you are not using a complete finished synth. You are using something different, and you can start, for example, with a DataSet A, but then you can add modules from other companies or from us or whatever to create something complete unique out of it. So the DataSet A makes it just cheaper than starting with a setup which is built out of different modules, because it almost, if you do something like the DataSet A with separate modules, it will be much more expensive, and you would not have the opportunity to store everything. So
Well, that's one of the things that, like, before we get too deep, because I want to talk a lot about Delta Sep A, and I'm going to let people know that now. But you have a lot of other really cool modules, and the reason why I keep wanting to go through each module is because honestly, I think they're slept on. I think a lot of people don't realize the power that's involved in some of your modules, and they're not as well publicized as I think they should be, considering what they are. I have a friend of mine who had your Swarm oscillator. He's done with Eurorack now. He's become a carpenter. He's a brilliant mind. And Willie, I love you to death, but you are crazy. He sold everything to become a carpenter. So, but hey, while he had it, it was one of his favorite oscillators. And so I want to bring up the Swarm oscillator, because the Swarm oscillator, in a way, like all these different modules kind of got bits and pieces are put into the Delta Step A in a way. But can you tell us a little bit about the Swarm oscillator and how that kind of came about?
Yeah, sure. The idea behind the Swarm oscillator was just to have something that creates really rich sounds with multiple oscillators, but that make it much easier to tune these oscillators. So if you're usually using multiple single oscillators, you have to tune them individually for everything. And that makes it very hard, especially in a live situation, to change really pitches. A lot of people are using modular systems by buying a really large wall of modules, and they know they can't edit everything on stage, so they have multiple setups within their modular system, and then they are using multiple oscillators just to create different sounds, like they did it in the past where they had multiple minimoogs, for example, because it's too hard to tune and to track the oscillators correctly in a live situation. And I thought we should have something that makes it so much easier to tune the oscillators, that we have the basic tune, which you can create in the utility module. You can mode, you can change it from 440 to 440. I don't know how it was, how much it was, 48 and 32 or something like
Yeah,
that.
432 is when you start wearing your tin hat.
Yeah, I'm not really. I don't really know
You
exactly.
have to tune your chakra.
I have to read the fucking manual for that. So if you have set up this, then it's quite easy, because you can just jump here through octaves with one knob, and with the other knob you can jump through half tones if you hold the shift key. And then you have this control which adds in multiple oscillators, so up to 8. And then you have the detune knob which detunes all these oscillators. So this makes it so much easier to get a rich sound with a nice audio animation in it.
Yeah, I can tell you that when he originally bought it, my buddy, when he bought it, his initial idea was, so he's a fellow sound designer, and we were working on multi-sampled contact instruments at the time, and we wanted to come up with a kind of new take on the classic super saw waveform type trance leads and whatnot, but use them for other genres of music and whatnot. And the Swarm oscillator is what we came up with. We were like, I think that would do that sound, but do it in a more modern way. And it was, so we tried that. We tried what was it? Oh God, I want to say it was the Cloud, the from Synthesis Technology, the E440, is it? I don't know. Maybe I don't know. The number of stuff I always get confused with. But anyway, the Cloud oscillator from that, we tried a couple other ones, and we tried some analog ones. And the Swarm one was the one that we could get it without any hassle. Like, it was instant, and we were able to just get exactly what we wanted, modulate it how we wanted it, and not fight with anything. It was just instant. So, as like you said, as a live performance tool, I can totally see it in that kind of rig. Because we never had issues with tunings. We were able to track across, I think it was 8 octaves without any problem. Like, we didn't need any more than 8 octaves. So it was like 8 octaves, and it was dead on, all the way through. And keep in mind, we're multi-sampling those, so it's like 4 layers, 4 velocity layers across 8 octaves, and everything was in tune, and we didn't have to go back and say, oh, we got to redo these samples and whatnot, which is kind of a big deal when you're doing an instrument that's like 6 gigs worth of ridiculous multi-sampling.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we added also features what other oscillators usually not have. So, for example, it has an built-in pitch quantizer. So when you are using an analog step sequencer, it's very important that where you have the tuning on a knob, it's really hard to really to get the right tones. Sometimes it's good. So for experimental stuff, you don't want to always get in tune completely with each step. So it can also be very nice, but in most cases, you really want to do tonal sequences. And if you have a quantizer where you can select a minor pentatonic scale, for example, and then you're just reaching tones which are fitting this scale, then it's very easy. Then you can just in a live situation change the knobs a lot, and it will always produce something musical. It's changed then, it's different then, but it's still musical. And this is also one of the features the Swarm oscillator has, but also is available in the Delta Sep A, because it really makes it much easier. So you can also, for example, put a random voltage from your LFO into the volt per active input, and then it creates tone sequences which match the scale you're selecting. And at the, I'm just going to the Delta Sep A again. At the Delta Sep A, you can even set it in a mode where the LFO then triggers the envelope. So it creates then really sequences which are randomized, but which are still maybe doing a blues scale or a pentatonic scale or kind of.
How do you know which scale you're in when you're setting this up? Like, I kind of want people to understand what the workflow is.
Yeah, so there is a table inside the manual, but you see here the 8 LEDs. I don't know if you see that in the cam. And if you change the knob here, you see already the LEDs are changing, but this works also on all other knobs. And you have 8 scales in red, which are always major scales, and you have 8 scales in blue, which are the minor scales. And in the table you can read that. So if you want to go for the pentatonic scale, which is the most popular one often for sequence like that, you can just go to the end of this. So here you have the minor pentatonic scale, and here I'm not using this, I'm just using the knob as an example. So in real, you are holding this knob and then you're selecting the scale here. And then you see there the LEDs selecting the scale. And at the end here you have a major pentatonic scale, and here you have a minor pentatonic scale. In the middle you have no scale activated anymore. And the first one in the right direction is just a simple half-tone scale, so where you just access all notes but with the right pitch. So it makes it much easier. You see on your table, you see the quantizer label on the paraphonic knob here, and then you see here also the scale select label on the oscillator volume. And this is because this has to be held down, and then you can select the scale here, and then you can always see on the LED which scale you have selected. And
Very
some people are out there who actually hear that, they hear when it's a minor scale or a major scale.
Oh, absolutely.
So for that reason, it's not really so hard. And you can, for example, just assign the sine wave to create kind of staircase pitches on the oscillator, and by changing the depth or the depth of the LFO, you're getting higher and lower notes. It changed then the selection of the different scales. So there's a lot of room for experimentation with sequences.
And that's one of the things about the Delta Sep is that, so the Delta Sep A is like, you're kind of getting a lot of features from the Swarm oscillator. You're getting features from Spectralis. You're getting features from a lot of your products all in one. And on the back end, you've got effects from the effects module, and then on top of that, this is the part that gets me kind of excited, and this is where I get kind of like, I want to be involved. You can save presets, and then you can blend between presets, and that's what gets me like, oh.
Yeah, that's called snapshots on it. So that feature is available already on the Swarm oscillator and also on the FX, but at the Delta Step A you can control the snapshot morphing with much more different controllers, or with the control voltage. It's available on the FX and the Swarm as well, and you can also automate that with an LFO, but at the Delta Set A, you can control the snapshot selection and the snapshot morphing by velocity, aftertouch,
Oh,
modulation.
really?
And that creates really very dynamic wave sounds, out of the synth, which would not be easily to program on any synth which works with kind of modulation matrices. So you just create a sound, what you hear when you are playing it, put that as a snapshot, and then you create a variation. You can use all knobs, you can use all buttons, doesn't matter. It even morphs from one filter output to another filter output if you use different filters on the different.
Oh, cool.
So you can, for example, use the 24 dB low pass on one sound and then morph to the 12 dB high pass filter of the analog filter in the next snapshot, and it just then morphs through smooth to the different through the different filter types. And so that is awesome. And then we have 8 of these snapshots. You cannot only have a linear morphing between 2 different sounds. You can do something that really has totally crazy mid sections where the sound, for example, totally explodes and then finds again to a normal tone or whatever. So it morphs also all the effects. It morphs from a flanger to a phaser, or from a phaser to a tempo delay, or whatever. So it morphs really everything, and
It's a smooth morph.
Yeah, and you can use it as a step morph, but you can also use it as a smooth morph. So if it's stepped, it's not a morphing anymore, then it's just a selection. But you can use that then like a sequencer, so that you have different sounds on each step. So for example, there's one preset inside where I use it as a kind of drum computer. So this is just a snapshot morphing jumps them through different sounds. And
so you can be making kick, snare, hi-hat, etc. And per step you're snapping between them, and it's fast enough to where you can sequence a track like that.
Yeah, sure. It's what you have. It's
And that's just Delta Step A you're hearing there.
Just the Delta Step A, or maybe there's the built-in delay, another delay. Sounds a little bit strange. So maybe that's coming from the FX. Yeah, now it's just the Delta Step A. But still the delay.
Man, that's so awesome. Now, how many snapshots can you hold up in there?
For each preset, you can store up to 8 snapshots, and you have 40 presets you can create. So 40 patches with 8 snapshots each.
And then you can morph between the snapshots, but you can't morph between the presets, right?
No, you can't do that.
Okay, but just checking.
But it selects them very fast. So if you go to really fast. It's not like on a lot of other synthesizers where it always takes a while to select a new sound.
So are you gonna have anything on the website where people can download snapshots and presets?
Oh, you can share them in our forum, because it's just simple audio files. You can also share them on Facebook. You can
import them as an audio file, you said?
Yeah, so it's an FSK modulated signal, like on old modems. So we have an output, the dry output of the VCA sends the signal, and the external input automatically recognizes when there's a sound coming and stores it into the edit buffer. So you can then store it if you want to, but first you can use it maybe, and then you can decide, oh, I don't like it, I skip it away, or you save it into your own memory. And the Delta Step A also has ROM memory, so all the preset sounds are inside the ROM memory, and you can save your own 40 patches, and you're not losing the factory presets by doing so. So if someone don't want to overwrite anything, you can, they are still in there in a special ROM section of the memory. So the 40 presets are really for you. So if you're selecting the presets, you can hold the shift button and select then here the ROM banks, or you can release the shift button and then you're selecting your own sounds you have stored into the unit.
So I'm showing people now. So this is the forum. So if you go to Radikal Technologies, you can actually hop right onto their forum, and they've got boom right here Delta Sep A. So you can go right in there and do that as well.
Probably not so much in there so far, but
well, hopefully after this that'll change.
Oh yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
No, so I'm going to say another thing about because really we haven't touched fully on the effects module yet. But another thing about that is at NAMM, when I first saw the Delta Sep A, one of the demos that you were doing was you were rocking the delay and the feedback of the delay, and then you were sweeping it. And so you were causing self oscillation of the delay and then sweeping the time of the delay and feedback. And it was so phenomenal sounding. And I don't say this like with any bullshit. It sounded so phenomenal that I literally grabbed people from other companies that I consult with, and I was like, you guys got to hear this shit. Like, and I brought them over and I was like, listen to what this guy's doing. This is how shit gets done right. And everybody was just like, oh yeah, that's that shit.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's I really liked when it's getting more when it has balls. I don't know.
Exactly. That's 100% it. It's got balls. Like when you hear it in person, there's so I mean, there's a lot of delays that will just self oscillate, but it's got balls when it does it. Like there's a meat to it. Like it really does grab your attention instantly. It's not like you just hear it and you're just like, oh, that's whatever. It's like every time you did that demo, I saw everyone in the general vicinity would turn quickly and just be like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, it's funny. And even on the Delta Sep A, we even made the delay a little bit better than on the FX, because we have a modulation on. So you really, I hate you. You know, you have the bottle on your table, and if I want to have a new drink, I have to go down to my frig and take a new one. Then I have to interrupt all this stuff, and everyone hates me for that. And I have nothing here, you know.
You can do that. No. You could do that because I can talk.
You told me we will talk for an hour. I don't know how long we already are talking here.
Well, hold on. We were supposed to start at 3:00, but you don't know how to use the internet, so no, it's fine. You can listen if you want to do that. You can do that because I have more stuff I can discuss.
You know, however, on the Delta Sep A, the delay has a much higher modulation rate, so you can go into the FM area with the delay modulation. I don't know if any module or any other delay does that, but it's really funny what you get, the sounds you are getting out of that, you know, just by modulating the delay time in an audio range, you know, not only in LFO range.
So I'm gonna hit you with two questions real quick. Both are coming from the chat and are kind of separate questions, but relate to the same thing, which is what are you guys doing? And that is so currently you have an oscillator, a filter, effects, and then a voice. But what you don't have is an envelope module and a sequencer module. But you have both of those in your other products. So the question is, are you working on envelopes and are you working on a sequencer?
So I don't think that we will do an envelope because that makes not so much sense for us because so we are not selling so many modules. You know, I don't think that there's a big market for an envelope generator because there are tons of envelope generators out there, and we spend an envelope generator with the Delta Step A, which has control voltage inputs for the attack time and the decay time, which is not so often available on envelope modules. And I think that's really a nice envelope. And but what we will do for sure, it's something what gives these the idea of the filter bank and the sequencer bank to our Euro. So we have not decided yet when we do that and how it will exactly look because the Eurek module size has a little bit limitations on
It does. It does.
but nice sequencers need a lot of room, you know. I don't like sequencers where you cannot interact with. So I need the skip button for per step, I need the mute button per step, I need last step buttons and so on. So the row is getting larger and larger. Then you need at least, I think, 16 steps. And you also need at least about 3 or 4 rows of it. And then how to bring that into the Eurek.
Well, would you consider something like a standalone box that is a sequencer? Because the reason that I look at it as making sense for Radikal is part of the Spectralis's charm from a lot of people was how cool the sequencer was. So it makes me think like, well, what if you guys did a standalone box that was both MIDI and CV? You know, is that something that you guys would be interested in? And obviously, that's another thing where you're starting to see more of this. You're starting to see more sequencers come about from different companies. But I'll be honest with you, it's also one of those things that a complex sequencer is a lot of development time, which means that it's going to be expensive, you know, like expensive to the user, like, you know, relatively price point. You might say, hey, it's not expensive to us because we're charging what we feel like we need to charge for it. But a really decent sequencer takes a lot of work.
Yeah, but we can use the sources of the Spectralist for doing something like that. I don't think that a synth engine is much more work than a sequencer. I think a sequencer has, if you know how the sequencer works and if you already developed a sequencer, it's not so hard to port that to another platform or something like that. But a synth engine has so many things where you are optimizing it. Optimizing it and optimizing it again, then you have to configure your complete DSP code because you are adding something and then the whole performance is gone for any reason because the optimization is not working good anymore, and so you have to really work hard on the DSP code. There's a complete different world, I think, from a step sequencer. So a step sequencer is something, if you compare that to a DSP synth engine, something really simple. Now I can imagine for me to develop a sequencer, but I cannot imagine me developing a synth like the Delta Step A. So for something like that, you need a genius.
No, you so you yourself though, you primarily hang in the analog development range, right? And then you have your partner doing most of the coding, right?
Yeah.
So
I already did some microcontroller programming in the past, so but only little small projects.
well, what I was gonna say though is what about so you've done things like, you know, developing a filter bank early on, and maybe you revisit something to that effect of a filter bank, but have you ever done any analog sequencers? Like, would you consider doing something to that effect?
Just only for this presentation of the filter bank sequences. So what I told you before. There's also a picture somewhere on my Facebook account. So this is a simple based breadboard square meter of electronics. I think the filter bank and the VCAs and the step sequencer, and it was all hand soldered and was just working, you know. But if I want to do a sequence, I would not do a simple analog sequence. So I would do that with a microcontroller.
Yeah, and that's the thing is
They
like
would do
they
it.
are two different things. You know,
Exactly.
like an analog sequencer versus a digital sequencer is a very different use case for me. Like I have a very basic analog sequencer in my rack and I
Uh-huh.
love it. I absolutely love it. I use it for a lot of stuff. But then I also have a really kick-ass digital sequencer as well. I've got a Fluxus One and I use that for like more complicated stuff.
Yeah.
So to me, like they're two different products, you know?
Yeah, but you can also say the Delta Set A is a digital synth and it's completely different to an analog synth. But I think the differences are
Well,
not
technically it's a
so big.
hybrid.
It's yeah, that's just one analog finger to keep people silent. but,
Oh, yeah, there you go.
but you know, a sequencer can do the same. You can create a digital sequencer which really feels like an analog sequencer or which behaves like an analog sequencer. But then it can has additional features which can't be realized so easy by an analog sequencer. You know, so it's for me much more interested in doing stuff in a new way or in another way than it's available already.
So is Radikal only going to be a Eurorack company from here on out, or are you guys going to continue doing desktop standalone modules?
No, I also would love to do something in the direction of the accelerator again, but with a better control, with a better interface, which looks more like the Delta Sep A, but the keyboard and the Delta Sep A. And I would not remove any of the CV stuff because I really like that. I think there's a polyphonic synthesizer with control voltage inputs and outputs would be, for example, something what I really would love to use. You know.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you guys, you know, like you were saying, you're selling more of the desktop Delta
Yeah.
Sep to me speaks to me of like, hey, that's a market that you guys can still kick ass in, you know?
Kick ass in. Yeah. If you call it like this, it's kick ass in.
Well, just the simple fact that like, you know, as I said before, I mean, I really think people underestimate still how small Eurorack is as a market, you know, in general. Like it gets a lot of press, but the reality is much smaller than what it appears on the outside, you know? So if you're kind of, you know, kicking modules out in one market, more desktop, then to me that kind of makes sense because hey, you can use that with any MIDI controller. Like the back of the desktop module has different ports on it, right? You have MIDI on it, and you have quarter inch, right?
Yeah, on the backside, and you have also quarter inch inputs for the FX unit, which is in the Delta Set, so you can also use it as an FX processor for other
Can you go
devices.
in? Can you go into the filters?
Yeah, sure, with the external input, but then you have not a quarter check input, you know. So for the filter input, you need just these little patch cords.
Hmm.
So you need an adapter at least. So I made mine one by myself here, just one panel board, and I put some holes into it and put some jacks into it, and that's all, you know. Don't need to buy something special. It's really, that can be the first self-built module for everyone. Just a little patch bay with quarter inch jacks and Eurorack jacks, you know, that's.
Yeah, I think, you know, I talk to people about like what their first module should be.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times I personally do enjoy semi-modular synthesizers. Like I really like the idea of something that's basically normalized and patched up and you can just instantly use it and then you can break it out and do the interesting things of modular. So,
Mhm.
you know, I'm often recommending things like the Mini Brute 2S with Rack Brute, and then you know you can do there's a lot of different semi-modular synths out there, everything from System 1 to Behringer has their Neutron, and the Delta Sep A is kind of like those things, but on a higher level. It's like Yeah, the oscillators, the filters, the effects, when you're buying one of those things, it's kind of like you're getting the best of the best. You
Oh,
know,
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
and I say that on a level of
You're absolutely right. For the first time tonight.
unbiased. No, I say that on a level of you can do things with that product that you just simply can't do with the vast majority of standalone synthesizers and oscillator modules or other modules that you're going to get without spending a really kind of a shit ton of money, to be honest with you. Even if you buy the individual radical technology modules like the swarm oscillator, like this stuff is not cheap. It's high level stuff,
Mhm.
but you incorporated so much of these high level features from your other modules into that at, I think it's 999 US dollars. Is that right?
Yeah, the Europe version, yes.
Yeah, you
Okay.
get a lot of like boutique level stuff all in one package, and that's pretty damn powerful, because even if you have something like so the Mini Brute 2S, in my opinion, has a phenomenal sequencer in it. You get multiple lanes that you can do like envelopes and stuff on it. um that thing is around like $600, and it's got a patch bay and all. The oscillators are kind of quirky in the sense of a desktop module, in that they're very much Eurorack like. They
Mhm.
don't have like a fixed tuning, like you want to do it analog style,
Mhm.
but this thing is like $600, but it doesn't have any effects. So if you add a Delta Sep A to the 3U rack brute on that, you instantly gain effects to send your mini brute through. And then you've got these deep oscillators, deep filters, all kinds of weird patch morphing and strangeness going on.
Mhm.
That kind of stuff you're not getting from, most other modules out there. So that's pretty, it's a lot of bang for your buck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you. So we are the
Whereas,
new Bang Bros.
well, yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it as like, because me personally, I look at like the swarm oscillator, like I said, was the one that my business partner had picked up, and I was like,
Mhm.
man, like it's not cheap, but it does so much more than the other stuff that we're looking at. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
it's one of those things where we're kind of like trying to weigh the pros and cons of the gear that we're buying. It can be difficult in Eurorack to understand, okay, what's value
Mhm.
and what's someone taking advantage, you know?
Yeah.
Because I look at certain modules that are analog, and they try to play up, okay, well, this is like boutique analog and we're going to charge you extra money because it's so high quality. But some of that same stuff, you can buy cheaper stuff that sounds every bit as good. So you really have to use your ears and kind of think with your head with what you're buying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. And especially the swarm oscillator, you are getting really complete different chambers like from other oscillators by using, for example, oscillator synchronization with eight with two times of eight clones with totally detuning or chord tuning on that. And this gives really sounds you can't get from anywhere else. So I just recorded some tracks only noises and drones from the swarm oscillator, and then I faded that into the groove what I produced on the Spectralist from time to time just to get some strange noises and so on. So I had just multiple tracks of noises just recorded by the swarm oscillator, and then I just fade them in and out with FX on it and to create a nice atmosphere, you know. And it does not sound like a simple oscillator. It just sounds like a wall of sound or something like that with FM and sync and oscillator swaps. So this is really something different, I think. And then the opportunity to morph through all this as well, you know. So you can morph from chords to normal tuning to sync to FM to whatever to create a really long sound development, which changes totally over time, goes into totally detuned clusters and goes back into a simple sine wave if you want to. That's just yeah, very
So
very
so
different.
with these modules though, what's your end goal? I mean, do you want to have a complete radical system that you sell as one, one complete, because that seems to be a skew that a lot of companies are going for nowadays, where they want to have like a whole system that's just their system and then they sell that in the shops. Is that something that you guys consider at all? I mean, without doing the envelope stuff, I would guess not, but
You know, if we first thought about what do we need for a complete radical voice, I mean, then we realized we need an envelope generator, at least one. We need an LFO and we need VCAs. And then we thought, how stupid can you get? So building a module like that, which works perfect for our line of modules, what we are not selling so much. So how how many can we sell? How many of these specialized modules could we sell? And then we thought it's stupid, just build a complete synth voice instead of that. A complete synth voice where you have everything what you need to combine it with our devices. And for example, the dataset A has a direct digital interface to the swarm oscillator. So you can play, if you use the delta in paraphonic mode where you can play chords, you can even combine that with oscillators from the swarm oscillator to get a much richer tone than it is just with the delta alone. So it's, and this is very special also because you don't have to patch up to 8 control voltage lines from the delta to the swarm. You just simply connect at the backside of the modules a little ribbon cable, and then it works like that. So that's was the idea behind that. And so it makes sense to expand the dataset A. If you want to have more oscillator freedom, it makes really sense to add the swarm oscillator because it's controlled then by the dataset A.
So the Delta Step A being a complete synth voice with these presets and whatnot. After finalizing, because I know it was a long, arduous journey to market for that. There was a lot. You had to get the metal cases done. There was just a lot involved in that process, and it took you a while to get everything done. Um, is that also something that you want to kind of continue, like doing different voices in your rack, or and kind of like releasing to desktop and modular, or are you just kind of gonna hang with the Delta Step A for a while and see how that plays out, or what?
Yeah, at the moment the dataset A is out. The first thing I think what we should do is something that combines the dataset A with maybe with a keyboard from us, what I told you before, the keyboard version of that with a small keyboard and
Which would
what we
kind of be like a
actually
successor. It would kind of be like a successor to an accelerator in a way, right? And
something
Spectralis, right?
between something between the accelerator and the dataset A. I think.
I would love that. No, would you be thinking polyphonic?
No, but I don't know what we really do it next. Maybe we do the Spectral 3 at that
We're
point.
talking in the future. We're talking way in the future. So I don't want people to think like, oh, this is something coming tomorrow. But I
Yeah,
mean, I just know that you are a musician who likes to play, and I've seen you play guitar. I've seen you play keys. I know
I'm
you like to.
really awful guitar player, so forget it. And I have a guitar to create new tones, but I'm really not a guitar player.
Well, I was brushing up on some of the videos. If you go and look at, I think it was the Spectralis demo video.
It was an
Um,
accelerator demo, I think, where
Valentine for Julie, I think it
yeah,
was.
it was just yeah, it was playing the Western guitar I bought. And I bought
It
this
actually
Western
had a
guitar.
very Pink Floyd vibe to it. So I recommend people go check that out if you want to hear a really interesting demo track. And that was you um
Yeah,
doing
but
the whole
I'm
thing.
playing two different chords on the guitar in the track or so. It's just finger picking on one chord and then playing two additional chords with as a strum guitar. I think that's everything. And you know, I'm recording it multiple times to get it as good as I can achieve that. And I would not play anything like this live because it would be really awful. You know, everyone can after a while play one chord on the guitar, but it's always, for me, it's getting difficult when I have to play two different chords in two bars or so, something like this. I don't know why, but I'm not a guitar player at all.
Well, what my wife and what my kids say is basically that uh, dad doesn't know more than four chords, and you know what? I'm okay with that because
Yeah,
four chords is all you need to make a great song.
yeah, that must be the best chords. You know, it depends on how, not how
It's
many.
all about how much attitude you put into those four chords.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, listen, I'll start closing up the show. And I want to thank you for coming on because this has been a really, really long time coming. I specifically kind of held off on a lot of the Synth Summit show stuff because I was like, man, I really want to do that interview first and foremost. Like, that's
Yeah,
really,
I'm very sorry. That's my fault because I
it
always,
is, it is, it's all your fault.
yeah, yeah, really. I just tried to refuse it, but you came up with that every fucking 3 or 4 weeks.
That's right.
You don't know what I drunk at that day. So one day I said, okay, we are doing that. No,
And you know what?
but now you know where we did that one time. We can also do it next time, maybe next Sunday or next Thursday. I don't care. So we can do that as often as you want. But
That's
now,
right.
when I, because but I would love to have a better video connection. Where it looks better, or does it better look than?
It actually got less blocky over time, but you should still learn how to use the internet and get a webcam.
Yeah, thank you so much for your tip. Yeah, I somewhere have a webcam, but I don't know where it is, and it's really really old. It's about 640 or so something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have two webcams here, so I'm compensating. But
Mhm.
what I would say is that I would really like to do some kind of I want to do some streaming of the jamming stuff because you've been doing some stuff on Facebook where you're putting up jams and that stuff, I mean, people are really enjoying it even when it's garbage.
Yeah, that's the point. Especially garbage. People love garbage. Yeah. So
We
that's
were
the
we were
reason
discussing this we were discussing this yesterday.
I'm forcing myself to do garbage meanwhile. That's
So
okay.
so a lot of the stuff that you've been putting up on Facebook, I mean, honestly is genuinely really interesting musical pieces. The I'm looking forward to the album that you're working on now. I don't know if you're allowed to announce that for yourself or not, but I'm looking forward to it just because the ambient piece that you had played to me was legitimately interesting to listen to. And normally ambient stuff kind of bores the shit out of me, and I'll be perfectly honest about that. Um, but that stuff was actually really good. I like the old ambient stuff of like Revolution Number 9 and a lot of like the old Music Concrete stuff where you had,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of different sound sources coming in and changing. I'm
Mhm.
not so much on the ambient stuff where it's like one drone for 4 hours. Like that stuff doesn't really do it for me. But the stuff where you're bringing in lots of different musical pieces and doing something interesting with it, that gets me kind of going.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
So
just producing, you know, one day I'm producing ambient, the next day I'm trying to do something funky, and then I'm failing, and then I'm doing ambient again. No, it was just fun. But I sometimes I really like to do some sequencing stuff with groovy swing factor in the drums, and on the next day I'm doing some moody stuff, and on the third day I'm trying to produce something which has a little bit more impact on the chords, and it just depends on my mood, so that I'm creating not necessarily ambient music, but I really love to create soundscapes but they always should have some musical impact. It's just only the sound itself is nice for an intro, but not for a complete piece of music, I think. So it should always evolve to something.
I agree. I agree. That's where I actually pulled, like, the name Flux originally came from the fact that, you know, when I was creating music, like, I didn't like picking a single genre, and I liked kind of doing lots of different things because it's all about emotion, and we have a lot of emotions as humans, and they're not all in the same genre, you know? So,
We have no emotions.
well, I mean, you're German, right? So, like, you have just one emotion and that's it, right?
Yeah, that's the German. That's true.
That's how that works.
We hate, for example. That's one of our mood.
Well, on that note, we'll close out the show, and I'll thank you again for coming on. Stay on here. I'm gonna stop the broadcast. I tell you that because a lot of people screw this up. But I just want. Oh, Jim just came in here, and I'll say screw you to Jim, from Ear Monkey Music.
Okay.
But but yeah, so I just want to tell people, go check out the Radikal stuff because it's legitimately interesting gear. Not just, I mean, the Eurorack stuff, obviously, because that's what's being sold right now. But even the desktop stuff, everything that they've made, I've been following it for a really long time. And I highly recommend you go check their stuff out because in the States, at least, you might not see as much advertisement for it, but it's really cool shit. So go check that stuff out.
Wow. Thank you very much. So, what was the number of your bank account?
Oh, yeah. My bank account, trust me, if you deposited to it, it would probably start sucking all the money out of your account because it's so negative. So you don't even want to do that.
Okay. Okay. So nice talk to. It was a nice, really nice. I don't know, a nice thing today to do tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to stop the stream now.